Over the span of 270 plus chapters and 6 years of publication, the new gen juggernaut that is Jujutsu Kaisen has featured a great cast of characters, and through their actions and their roles, across the story and its battles, they've made their marks in the history books of their verse and in the hearts of ours. But not everyone can be the honored one, or the fallen one. Some characters are just cogs in these systems, others anomalies in power within their verse. But only one of these characters can truly qualify under the title of the Fraudulent One. Before we get into the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more Jujutsu Kaisen content, turn on post notifications, and most importantly, comment down below your take on the matter, or possibly get ready to defend your favorite character, because all allegations will be discussed. So, in line with the premise of the video, I've assembled around 10 characters across the JJK verse that have had no shortage of fraud or sham slander from the fandom over the years for a variety of proclaimed crimes against the community. And I believe all of them have a case open for discussion when it comes to being crowned the biggest fraud in Jujutsu Kaisen. But firstly, allow me to define or rather establish the benchmark I use to classify such a group of characters. So one of the official Google definitions for the word fraud is a person or thing intended to deceive others, typically by unjustifiably claiming or being credited with accomplishments or qualities, and wrongful or criminal deception. In terms of this scenario, practically a character that may have been hyped or set up to perform a specific task, which resulted in them fumbling in some manner, essentially not living up to the hype. Now, seeing as we can only crown one character as the top tier fraud, we'll be ranking the characters in the least to greatest fashion, with the least being able to beat the allegations, and the greatest having to carry the crown of pure trickery. Let's get to cooking. Now for our first case in fraud court. As a matter of fact, just go ahead and imagine you as the audience as a jury in Higuruma's domain expansion Deadly Sentencing. Anyway, the first case we'll hear is that of the 17-year-old special grade sorcerer, Yuta Okkotsu. Now I'll be honest in saying, I initially made the script for this Yuta segment long before the final chapters of the Sukuna fight and that of the series, and upon reading said final chapters, a lot of my thoughts on Yuta's fraud case changed. I think the primary charge against Yuta is in regards to the whole Gojo body takeover, because until then, Yuta was in his bag. Not only did he manage to land the finishing blow on Kenjaku, with the help of Todo and Takaba of course, he also, in conjunction with Rika, held off Kenjaku's vast army of cursed spirits he had accumulated using Geto's curse manipulation, and upon arrival to the Sukuna fight, put together the most cohesive plan to end the 1,000-year-old curse, and actually began to initiate some serious damage to the King of Curses. The only reason his overall plan didn't work was due to circumstances out of his control, aka Megumi being in his feels, and because of that, he had to exit the battle due to taking one of Sukuna's world-cutting slashes. Now, for bro's fake out of the century grand entrance at the end of chapter 260, just for it to be good old Yuta, who to most wasted the gift that was Gojo's power, as he confronted Sukuna in chapter 261, but was already down and out in chapter 263, although that is longer than Kashimo for keeping record. Well, it was definitely a letdown to most, who were expecting some blockbuster Gojo Sukuna rematch, especially now that Yuta spectated the first match and had key knowledge into Sukuna's capabilities. But he quite literally did fall flat on his stomach, as his time in control of Gojo's body ran out. Right after hitting Sukuna with a point-blank hollow purple, the King of Curses couldn't even defend against in the slightest, which effectively did little to nothing to his overall health bar. Like, I'm pretty sure Sukuna just brushed it off like a tickle. So in terms of damaging Sukuna, Yuta Gojo definitely fits the bill of a fraud, but in terms of the overall plan, Yuta actually met expectations. It was said best in chapter 269 by Yuji, but Yuta using Gojo's Infinite Void perfectly counters Sukuna's Malvin Shrine, the domain expansion that was made clear throughout the entire arc to be an unlivable situation for anything within it, as in the other sorcerers not named Gojo wouldn't even enter the fight until his domain was taken out of his arsenal. So knowing that Yuta took on Malvin Shrine in such a way that no one had to die as a result of it, and I guess you could say he did manage to damage Sukuna to a degree overall from it, should clear Yuta of his fraud charges, and actually, in consideration from his previous feats during the fight, should propel him into MVP considerations for the arc. But him going AFK in the middle of the final match was actually insane. Next case we'll hear in fraud court is that of the feverish gambler Kinji Hakari. Now his charge is a bit more simpler. When the world needed him most, someone while in jackpot mode who could have easily tanked Sukuna's Malvin Shrine, actually all of Sukuna's slashes as a matter of fact, Hakari spent a total of 31 chapters having tea time with Urame, the sidekick. Now, like Yuta's case, how I initially had Hakari's case going down is very different now that the final chapters are out and the fight has concluded, and bro did nothing. And yet I still have him low on this list, therefore beating the fraud allegations, because I think his absence from the Sukuna fight made sense narratively. If you look closely at everyone who fought Sukuna, they all had some narrative build up in their matchups. Gojo and Sukuna was the fight of the series, and frankly all of New Gen. Yuta, being Gojo's successor, had to take up the responsibility. Yuji and Sukuna had their main character dynamic going on, and who else to bring out Yuji's full potential than his partner in crime in Todo. Both Higuruma and Maki had weapons with the potential to harm Sukuna, and also the idea of the King of Curses, who had the most curse energy in the series, going against Maki, the fighter who broke free from curse energy, was actually kinda cool. Overall, most of the characters that fought Sukuna just made sense in terms of writing and matchups. Even though Hakari could theoretically survive the worst of Sukuna's attacks way better than the other characters, his arsenal of superpowered punches and kicks wasn't gonna do a thing. Either way, as a hyped up heavy hitter, he didn't underperform but definitely didn't overperform, so he slides out of court case with probation. Now the next case we'll hear in Fraud Court belongs to that of the special grade volcanic cursed spirit in Jogo, or I like to say, Jogo, because if you didn't know before, know now. If there's one character I'll defend more than anyone else but like Toji or Gojo, it's my boy Jogo, and I'll be stepping down from the jury to serve as his personal attorney. Now Jogo's fraud case is pretty apparent, and entails his 3 fights with both Gojo twice and Sukuna once, which he both lost. Pretty bad. I mean, not only did he get outboxed and both thrown around like a ragdoll and sunned in every way imaginable, he was also the first recipient of Sukuna's victory speech, and worst of all, he's a fire disaster cursed spirit who was killed by a fire attack. But with the most obvious allegation comes the most obvious defense. The guy or thing went against the 2 strongest characters in the verse, and his defeat shouldn't be held against him considering that your favorite character probably got trashed by Sukuna in the final fight. He's giving everyone them hands. And we see when Jogo actually went up against people who, well, weren't gods in their verse, such as 2 very capable grade 1 sorcerers in Nanami and Naobito Zenin, the head of one of the 3 big sorcerer clans, as well as Maki. Well, he cooked them. Literally, he made barbecue of them in a matter of seconds, and could have very well went on to kill any of these sorcerers in Shibuya, barring a Gojo. So that takes away from any criticism to anything about Jogo's ability or power after the fights. His battle and eventual loss to Sukuna was due to the plan he had, which was for Sukuna to bring about the Age of Curses right then and there. So of course his revival was essential to the plan. Of course said plan was dangerous, as we clearly saw in Sukuna's unhinged beatdown on Gojo, but he stood 10 toes down and did what he had to do for his people. Because that's what Jogo is and always has been, a family man who was willing to sacrifice it all to see curses in the position of humans living out their truths. Does this really look like the man you could call a fraud? Yeah, he's definitely beating the allegations. The next case we'll hear is that of everyone's, or maybe no one's, favorite principal, Masamichi Yaga. And if that wasn't the man's official job title, I wouldn't even begin to know what he's actually supposed to do, because it damn sure wasn't being a principal. Now that sentiment isn't due to any of his actions from his introduction in the beginning of the story to Shibuya incident arc. He obviously wasn't meant to fulfill the primary teacher or sensei or even like guidance role, because we had Gojo for that. The reason for my problem with him lies in chapter 147, the chapter which Yaga met his very inconsequential end. I'll actually go as far to say an absolutely meaningless one. Now going into this chapter, Yaga had been given the death penalty by the Jujutsu higher-ups for his involvement in supposedly inciting the Shibuya incident, when in reality, they just wanted to force him to reveal the secret to his curse technique, which allows him to create self-sufficient cursed corpse with no limit and thus an army of them if given time, which was enough for the higher-ups to designate him as a possible special grade level threat. And while they finally wised up and realized they have enough of those running amok with questionable mental states and the uncanny ability to not follow orders, so they decided to kill him off. But when looking at the broader context in the post-Shibuya era, Yaga has students on the run from death penalties, others severely injured, and if they didn't fit into those 2 categories, they were facing the biggest Jujutsu terrorism event in the Culling Games by the same guy who orchestrated Shibuya. And yet, in his death, the only thing he accomplished was keeping his curse technique, which really didn't end up mattering, a secret. Oh well, wait. He didn't do that either. And to be more specific, his curse technique capable of building an army that's not even remarkably strong individually required months of prep time. Sukuna started wreaking havoc less than a month after Yaga's death. So again, His secret ultimate curse technique with the potential to change the game wouldn't have done anything, and is definitely not something to die for. But again, the entire premise of the character and his end was just so redundant, seeing as he should have been the primary caretaker of all the students now that Gojo's gone. Definitely not Mei Mei. Like, do something impactful with the little screen time you have. You're the principal. But we never got to see that, and Bo will be convicted of criminal fraud, because he definitely lied on that job application. The next case we'll hear won't really be a case but a quick hearing. She's already been convicted. I gotta air out Angel/Hana Karusu, cause it seems the whole sudden ending of the series got everyone forgetting these two's roles in the final fight, or they just got a killer PR team headed by Megumi. Either way, we're talking about it. Hana's curse technique extinguishment, was literally the thing, by textbook definition, to end Sukuna's control of Megumi's body. Like, Yuta's entire plan revolved around it. It was shown before to do some serious damage, and when she used it on Sukuna, it was activated at maximum output, with Sukuna being ambushed. And all Sukuna got was a few burns, and his reverse curse technique restored with a black flash on Todo, who was protecting Angel. You know, the being who was supposed to be dealing the final blow? She was absolutely useless. But next we have someone who is a certified fraud, as in guilty before proven innocent. We have Hajime Kashimo, the god of lightning, the 400-year-old sorcerer who reigned as the strongest in the Edo era, and the one character who actually yearned to fight Sukuna, was practically begging for him. 2 chapters. That's how long he lasted. Well, really 1.5. And that was right off the heel of a 13-chapter long fight between Gojo and Sukuna. The possible defense Kashimo fans can pull is to bring up the fact Kashimo was the only character besides Gojo to take on Sukuna, a much stronger version than one Gojo fought, in a 1v1, with no other characters to assist or take hits or stall the guy. And he also had to face what seemed like an outrageously obnoxious amount of wall-cutting slashes, in order for Gege to show off Sukuna's new strength. And while that defense does deserve some credence, as well as the argument, at the end of the day, his character had one purpose, one great big meaning, one ultimate move that he had to use on an ultimate battle. And the guy lasted 2 chapters, and he spent half of that glazing the man. Sadly, Kashimo is just not beating the allegations with that performance. But Kashimo fans should take solace in the fact the real ones will always remember the masterclass of hype against Hakari. Following that, we're finally reaching the level of fraudulence with the next characters I plan on discussing, that gives them all a serious shot at being crowned the Fraudulent One. And we're starting this low tier off with Suguru Geto, the special grade former Jujutsu sorcerer who switches sides to become the most dangerous curse user alive. But that title never really seems to stick when it comes to his general perception among the fandom. The one that does is quote unquote the weakest special grade sorcerer, an allegation that bro simply can't beat seeing as he's dead, and we all know for a fact it's true. But I'm never gonna give a character flack for being the weakest of the strongest because, well, someone gotta be at the bottom or they wouldn't be at top. Either way, that isn't the allegation Geto has to defend himself from in this video. It's his idiotic plan that allowed him to get Power of Love one-shotted out of the series by a teenager. And allow me to break it down. Looking back on the Night Parade of 100 Demons, well, for starters, it's been confirmed by the strongest being in the verse, the narrative of the series, that Geto, if he had retained a complete arsenal of his vast cursed spirits he kept with his curse manipulation technique, which we know numbered 6,462 with special grade curses littered among the crop, he would have beaten Yuta in their ultimate clash between Maximum Technique Uzumaki and Yuta and Rika's limit breaking Love Blast. So the question I have to ask him on the stand is why exactly did he split his forces? Now the easy answer to that question would be he needed to distract the sorcerer forces so we could isolate Yuta and kill him. But like, why? We already know grade 1 sorcerers like Nanami and Mei Mei and even Todo don't reside at Tokyo High where Yuta was. And frankly, the only sorcerer he needed to worry about was Gojo, who he had Miguel successfully occupying him. What exactly stopped Geto from straight up pulling up on Yuta like he did near the beginning of the arc and just using Uzumaki on him full force right then and there? So say the Panda, Inumaki, and Maki trio try stopping him as they should be the only people on campus, well, we already saw him handle them with hands only. And so what if Nanami or Mei Mei was there? Fast forward a body snatching and into Shibuya, we see Kenjaku, equipped with Geto's curse technique, scare off Mei Mei and her little brother Yu off of aura alone. At best, he might have summoned a few curses, but for the most part, we're led to believe he sort of just scared off a grade 1, without really having to do much. And you're telling me Geto couldn't have done the same? Maybe just send like 3 grade 1 curses their way? Or is the difference in aura between Geto and Kenjaku that different? Either way, Geto splitting his curses when he had capable curse users already holding up the main Tokyo High faculty was kinda just him showing off, or rather seeing he overplanned and simply unnecessarily stretched himself thin. Bro was overall a pretty ineffective villain, but that probably further shows just how effective Gojo was as a deterrent to all forms of evil. And speaking of Gojo, his fraud case is up next. Now I thought it was a bit poetic, the strongest and most tragic duo have now found themselves together even after death, contending for not the strongest duo, but the fraudulent duo. They were capping then, and Gojo more certainly capped now. Gojo's fraud case requires only one piece of evidence submitted to the court. Chapter 221, page 19. 3 words of dialogue. Nah, I'd win. That one panel became the most memeable piece of fiction for months, and definitely the most across all of new gen anime history. Bro went global with the self-hype, and well, he didn't win. Gege, who's the #1 Gojo hater, had bro in heaven admitting not only Sukuna wasn't at full strength, but he didn't think he could have defeated him even without Sukuna using the 10 shadows, dismissing anything about the 3v1 that occurred and confirming Gojo simply got unmatched when it came to aptitude for battle. Now of course there's always a counter argument, but with such a blanket statement from Gojo himself, there isn't much defense. I will say, even though Gojo went in with the intentions of winning, when it came to the overall plan, his role if he couldn't finish the job was to take out the possibility Sukuna could use his domain, opening the fight for the others to join in without such a massive threat hanging overhead. And he did exactly that. But if you're coming in with generational self-hype and appear as if you're up on the scoreboard in the entire fight and not finish the job, Gojo effectively blew a 3-1 lead. Well, no, not even that. He blew a 3-0 lead. Now, I'm never gonna call bro a fraud, same applies to Geto, but they're definitely not leaving the court case without a sentence in fraud jail. And at least they get to serve the sentence together. Now, they both managed to evade the crown of fraudulence because there are 2 more cases ahead of them, with the weaker case of the 2 being the first joint or group prosecution in this video. We, the jury, are going to be looking at the embarrassing travesty that is the Kyoto Metropolitan Cursed Technical College. We're not just looking at the students, we're looking at that curriculum too. Now before I get into the semantics of such an easy, massive case of fraud, I'd first like to reference an all-time quote from grade 1 sorcerer Atsuyu Kusakabe when witnessing the special grade level fight between Sukuna and Jogo. Shibuya had become elephants dancing on ants, and then came in the Kyoto Kids, more ants to get stepped on. Now it's one thing to be Gojo, the strongest sorcerer of the modern era, and for your standing or your title to be solidified since you were a teenager, for him to hype himself up in that manner, that's a bit justified. But then comes the Kyoto Kids, who weren't a part of the initial group of sorcerers who ended Shibuya, which did have Jujutsu students in the group such as Yuji, Megumi, and Maki. Those kids were deployed in a situation in which they were only concerned about taking out transfigured humans, completely unaware of the special grade level dangers the train station contained. And once they were aware of not only said dangers and also Gojo himself being sealed, there was an attempt to get the students to safety and out of the situation immediately. Now that's one thing, but the Kyoto Kids were fully aware of what Shibuya was turning into by the time the news of the incident had reached them. And once hearing it, they decided, with the approval of their teacher, that it was their time to pop out. Well, they need to pop into a different school with a way different teacher after that performance. They should have been on the first flight to Africa to get trained by Miguel after what we saw from them. Now Mai Zenin, a second year, hit the guy with her best, her masterpiece, a sniper shot. You know she was sweating when she created that. But that was blocked with one hand. Miwa, her moment to be useful. The coldest engines we've seen in the series. She's done put her existence into this attack. Blocked with one hand. Momo, I don't even know why she thought she had the audacity to get that off, knowing her the other Kyoto Kids have been non-factors, but yeah, she tries to get off her strongest. Blocked with one hand. The anime had Kenjaku smiling like he was catching the morning breeze. And remember, Mekamaru died for this, so these kids could watch from home safe, not from danger, but from embarrassment. Now I will say they actually had a good attack plan, at least a cohesive one when it came to positioning and timing. And no, not every Jujutsu student is going to be cracked like the main characters, but ain't no way these are 3rd years and 2nd years out here looking discombobulated. The entire Kyoto school barring Todo, and actually I'll let Arata go too, has been found guilty of fraud. But now for the biggest fraud in the series. It's not Yuji, I'm gonna give Megumi a pass, and it's not even Sukuna. Sorry if y'all were waiting for Sukuna hate train, because if there's one character that knows how to beat them allegations, it's him. He's the one that came back from a 3-0 lead with Gojo, went through the gauntlet of characters, aka the entire cast, and you'll never convince me him going out the way he did wasn't bad writing. But for this title, the Fraudulent One just has to go to a character that's seen it all, who knows your move before you know it yourself, and with 1,000 years of experience, is the sole perpetrator for the series that is Jujutsu Kaisen and its events. We have the case of Kenjaku. Now, after hearing such a name, I'm not surprised that some of you may immediately come to his defense. Kenjaku orchestrated Shibuya. He came and conquered, got exactly what he wanted. Kenjaku then orchestrated the Culling Games. He came and conquered, got exactly what he wanted. Everything just goes to plan with him. But he never got what he truly wanted even after 1,000 years of planning. I want us to take a brief look at all of Kenjaku's actions and the premise behind them. Why did he spend the majority of his lifespan walking the country looking for the strongest? It was for the Culling Games so he could eventually cultivate and optimize its participants' cursed energy. But then why did he have to assassinate the 6-eye users that came out of the Gojo clan? Well, because the users eventually became strong sorcerers who foiled his plan and stopped being Tengen's merger every time it came around. Well then, why does he want to stop the Star Plasma merger? Because he wants Tengen to evolve into a cursed spirit so that he may use curse manipulation on him, and it makes Tengen compatible for the merger. And why did he essentially create Yuji as a vessel? So that he may bring about the revival of Sukuna, the strongest sorcerer. And why did he do that? Well, the guy had some bold plans and needed the strongest muscle he could find to help him carry it out. Because that's what Sukuna essentially is in the grand scheme of things. Muscle slash the guy who gets stuff popping. And also insurance against Satoru Gojo if the prison realm failed, as we see when Kenjaku uses Sukuna as a bodyguard at one time. But what about Shibuya? Well, he needed to trap Gojo, the 6-eyes user who was capable of stopping the Culling Games and merger before it happened. Either way, it all boils down to the Grand Merger, the event in which humankind will fuse with Curse energy and bring about the all new and powerful and new age for Curse energy in general. And why does he do all this? Because it just sounds fun to him, and he's curious to know what it would have looked like, meaning he'd have to see it. So I don't think after laying it all out, it should be a surprise that after 1,000 years of planning and acting, Kenjaku didn't get what he wanted. As it stands now, following his death at Yuta's hands, he won't get to see the product of his millennium of intricate action, which is all he wanted and worked towards. Yeah, it's GG's. I really don't think anyone is as deserving of this crown other than him. And according to most, he's in the big three with Gojo and Sukuna. So if Gojo's the honored one, Sukuna the fallen one, he can rest easy as the fraudulent one. And with that, we are reaching the end of this video. Another one of my more creative projects, and one as always I've had fun with. If you enjoyed Jujutsu Kaisen content, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more, turn on post notifications, and most importantly, make sure to comment down below your thoughts. Have a nice day.